This is Whiskey Whereabouts. I'm Tim, and I've got Glen Scotia 18 year today. The sort of slept on Glen Scotia in the core range as compared to the 15, the Victoriana. Is there a good reason for that, or is this an overlooked gem? My whiskey journey has taken me to Scotland and back. I've explored whiskey education, tastings, and distilleries from Islay to Speyside. And now my journey continues here, with you, on Whiskey Whereabouts. So if you don't know, Glen Scotia is kind of the overlooked or the other distillery in Campbeltown, right? There's Springbank, there's the other distillery that's owned by Springbank's parent, and then there's Glen Scotia. And I found my way to this bottle a little over a month ago. I was in the market for a nice 18-year single malt Scotch whiskey that wasn't going to break the bank. I was looking to have something on hand to open up to commemorate a certain NBA team winning its 18th record NBA championship. And so I went down to the whiskey shop and looked around at what my options were, and this bottle fit the bill. It's pretty well presented, 18-year whiskey, 46%, non-chill filtered. There's some confusion online I've seen about whether or not color is added. There's a video on YouTube where Ian McAllister is tasting the whiskey, walking us through the notes, and he says that it is natural colored. That's good enough for me. It's a vatting of refill bourbon casks and refill American hogsheads, and then it all spent the last 12 months in first fill Oloroso casks. So going in on the nose, this has been open plenty of time. I poured it before I even started filming, and it needs it. This is gonna be the first thing I can tell you about this whiskey is that time, having this bottle open for a little bit and letting this whiskey breathe, has done a lot for it. So starting in on the nose, neat. Even after you've given it the minute for every year, the full 18 minutes or whatever to open up, it takes a little time. You need to be a little bit patient for it to kind of go through its phases. And here's what I mean by that. There's a couple of elements that kind of present as you sit with it, as you acclimate to it, as it sits and is exposed to the air a little bit, that go through a couple of phases. The first thing that jumps out now to me, this bottle's been open for 3 weeks or so, is a sort of a real garden floral, kind of in the earth kind of floral element that hangs over when the nose first kind of meets you. Then the sweetness, vanilla, butterscotch. Then there's fruit. So you're getting these stages, right? Fruit, it's tropical, ripe. Then you sit with it for a little bit. Go back to that sweetness. It's a lot of sort of apple underneath those first waves here. Sweet, it's like apple juice, apple. There's oak, there's salt, there's a sort of a bready, like a baked bread or warm, malty note. So a lot of phases, right? Haven't even really talked about a sherry note, but it's there. It's just all the way at the bottom. And it's dried fruit, it's raisins, little bit of baking spice, but that sort of raisin sherry element. You can see the level. It is well below the shoulders, well below the label. The label sits a little high on this bottle, but it has had time. Even after a week of being open, this whiskey still was much tighter, and these sort of elements were not sort of opened up into these specific flavors. I found it to be a little hot, a little earthier, vegetal. That's kind of opened up into that tropical fruit note now, I think, and it was overwhelmingly vanilla cream. It was drowning in it, all over sort of everything that was in the nose when it was not a neck pour, but had only been open for about a week. A couple more weeks have really let this kind of develop and open up some of these different flavors. Going in neat on the palate now, vanilla, honey, oak, there's some sort of black pepper. It's not hot, but there's, again, 46%. There's enough there. It has a pretty solid, well-rounded presence. There's a real nuttiness here. There's raisin, again, that that sherry influence probably. There is that apple again. That's coming through. That fruit is present after you kind of unpack the sort of sweeter, the sort of richer sort of vanillas and those type of sweet. Go back for the finish now. Solid medium length finish here. Gets a little interesting. We're leading with the sort of raisin element that I was talking about before. Then there's that vanilla, the honey, that sweetness. After that, I'm getting a new fruit sweetness. It's more of a red fruit. It's a sweeter sort of, not tart, but a red sort of berry, kind of sweet berry fruit element. There is oak, kind of tannin, bitter. It is sort of buried under those other elements where it belongs. I feel balanced out nicely with these other elements. And as it recedes, you're kind of left with that vanilla berry sweetness with a dusting, just a little bit of the mix trailing of the sort of casky kind of oak, a little sort of bitter to offset it. And I'm picking up something kind of almost minty, kind of in the sinus more than sort of on the palate as that finish kind of goes. It's been a long sort of solid journey for this whiskey since that again that been open for about a week. The finish was very casky. It was very oaky, vanilla, tannic bitter, a little monotonous and a little out of balance. So this has really benefited a lot with a little bit of time. And a lot of times, and not always, and every whiskey is different, when we have a whiskey that needs some time to breathe, we can kind of accelerate that, or we can kind of put a spotlight on it when we put the water in. And I'm just going to tell you, it's give and take here. There's pluses and minuses here. I'm going to give it, I don't have a huge pour, but that's about where I want to be, I think, with it. Let this sit for just a second. I'll come back and explain. There's the caramel. All right, so I've got the sweetness. It's sort of sticking together, I think, with the water. There's the apple. So the fruit has stepped straight up front. It's a little more tart. It's a little bit more of a tart green apple than that sort of apple juice. It was very earthy, very vegetal when I first opened it. Now neat. That's coming up a little bit more tropical fruity. This is now sliding back to that position where it's a little bit more ripe, sort of earthy vegetable. This is that sort of Campbeltown element that we talk about. This is the way it's manifesting to me in this pretty sweet whiskey. So fruit, the sort of salty sweet, turned up. A lot of the other elements are kind of washed out here on the nose. Going in on the palate now. Again, it's vanilla cream with a little bit, vanilla cream with caramel icing on it now. And the fruit is definitely there. The raisin is coming in big. So you have a lot of that. There is that sort of apple kind of element, but it's turned down a little bit on the palate. And I would say that this holds up okay to the water. I don't know that you need it. So where do I come out on this whiskey? I kind of understand why it doesn't get the attention that some of its sort of sibling kind of whiskeys in the core range get. It isn't a whiskey with sort of big, distinctive kind of Campbeltown or any of that sort of element. You've heard me talk about it. These are a lot of sort of common sort of tasting elements. It does have something. It has that dimension. It has that sort of tropical or vegetal, depending on at what stage you're having this whiskey. It has something. It's a very solid whiskey. 18 years. I paid $140. I've seen this in the $130 range. That's Spayburn territory. You know what I mean? That is a pretty solid value. So on the whiskey, I'm going to say that this is a straight up 4-glass whiskey, but I am going to increase the rating to final rating with the value included to 4.25, giving it a little bit of credit for keeping a reasonable price in this sort of market for this big age statement, well-presented whiskey. And so if you've had this one, let me know how you'd rank it against the other Glen Scotias. And in the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe. We're working towards our 2,000 subscribers. When we get there, I've got a very special episode planned. I've got a special bottle, Lagavulin, Mexico, big ABV. You don't want to miss that. So make sure you subscribe. You can use this big button right over here, and I will see you on the next one.